or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We got a good team tonight. Chloe, Sebastian, Maria and Katie. Let's have some fun, shall we? It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Schools are no longer safe for children. Find out why in just a moment when I reveal the mad and dangerous ideas being peddled to our kids. In the big story, as Rishi Sunak strikes a deal with NHS consultants, would a Labour government mean 5 years of union chaos? The Mail newspaper are reporting that dogs and cats are getting badly sick after Easter. What's going on? I'll be asking my Mark Meets guest, ITV This Morning's in-house vet, Dr. Scott Miller. Also tonight, as it shifts to the left, would Margaret Thatcher even make it into this modern-day Conservative Party? I'll be asking her former top advisor, Niall Gardner. And in my take at 10, how do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? I'll be dealing with the disgraced royal, who is the subject of 2 major Hollywood films, one of which is out this weekend. My unapologetic verdict on Randy Andy at 10. You won't want to miss it. 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. Mark Dolan Tonight is your perfect Saturday night in. So crack open something cold and fizzy or fire up the kettle and let's get to work. We start with the news headlines and a very good friend of mine, Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, good to see you as always. The top stories this evening. Around 12,000 households remain without electricity in Ireland this evening after Storm Kathleen swept across the island and other parts of the country today. It's brought strong wind, resulting in the cancellation of dozens of flights. Gusts of up to 70 miles per hour have been felt in Northern Ireland and the west of Britain. Over 140 flights, in fact, have been called off today. Meanwhile, 2 planes on the runway at Heathrow Airport have collided, causing damage to their wings. Footage shows a Virgin Atlantic plane's wing touching a British Airways aircraft surrounded by emergency services. The Virgin Boeing 787-9 plane had completed a flight and was being towed to a different part of the airfield. It is understood, though, that there were no passengers on board at the time of the incident. A Conservative MP says he was the first whistleblower to alert police to the parliamentary honey trap sexting scandal. Bosworth MP Dr Luke Evans says he was the victim of cyberflashing as the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into unsolicited messages with Leicestershire Police. On Thursday, Tory MP William Bragg told The Times he'd sent intimate pictures of himself to someone on a gay dating app and was then manipulated into providing colleagues' phone numbers. So far, around a dozen MPs, staff and journalists are known to have been targeted. Now, the torso found at a nature reserve in Salford belonged to a man aged older than 40. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Downs. The victim is believed to have been dead for a number of days. DNA tests are ongoing to identify him. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been detained by Dutch police during a demonstration in The Hague. Thunberg was put in a large bus by officers along with other protesters who tried to block a major highway into the administrative capital of the Netherlands. The 21-year-old activist was protesting against the Dutch government's fossil fuel subsidies. And workers across the country have today been granted the legal right to request flexible working from the day they start a new job. Previously, it only applied if someone had worked for their employer for 26 weeks or more. Flexible working is defined as a way that suits an employee's needs, for example, having flexible working timings or working from home. Experts believe it could benefit millions of people and increase productivity. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks to the brilliant Tatiana Sanchez, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a very busy Mark Dolan tonight. In the big story, as Rishi Sunak strikes a deal with NHS consultants, would a Labour government mean 5 years of union chaos? I'll be asking a top Fleet Street insider. As it shifts to the left, would Margaret Thatcher even make it into this modern-day Conservative Party? I'll be asking her former top advisor. And the Mail newspaper are reporting that dogs and cats are getting sick after Easter. What's going on? I'll be asking my Mark Meets guest, ITV This Morning's in-house vet, Dr. Scott Miller. And after 10, how do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? I'll be dealing with the disgraced royal, who is the subject of 2 major Hollywood films, one of which is out this weekend. My unapologetic verdict on Randy Andy at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. Plus 3 top pundits who tonight haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. This evening, journalist and writer Benedict Spence, political commentator Rebecca Jane, and fearless columnist and TV personality Nina Mishkov. Lots to get through, folks, plus the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com, and this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, a big 2 hours to come. We start with my big opinion. Schools are not safe for children. How has it come to this? Primary school teachers have been told to let pupils change their gender without telling their parents, in a direct contravention of UK government guidelines. An investigation into over 600 schools' transgender and equality policies found that up to 3/4 of those surveyed misrepresented sex and gender protection laws, while some were content to enforce gender-neutral rules like letting small children decide which toilets and changing rooms they wanted to use. This madness is across the educational establishment in the private and the public sector, and even, wait for it, in Church of England primary schools, where in one trust, teachers have been advised to help young girls use breast binders when out on school trips. You heard me right, breast binders. Now, a breast binder, if you don't know what that is, and you're lucky if you don't, is a medieval device that literally straps the breasts of a young girl down to stop them growing. That's progress, is it? The same trust has said that students on school trips can sleep in bedrooms that match their chosen gender identity, which of course potentially means young boys in dormitories with young girls. And that's progress too, is it? The analysis carried out by Protect and Teach, a network of women protecting education from cult influence, and more power to them for doing that, focused on 2 counties in the southwest of England after research showed that they had some of the highest rates of gender identity referrals in the UK. Now, what does this all mean in plain English? Well, it's young kids beginning the journey of changing their sex. Although, of course, they're being sold a lie, because you cannot change your sex. Don't take my word for it. Here is one of the world's leading experts on fertility, Dr. Robert Winston, speaking on the BBC's Question Time show.
I'll say this categorically, that you cannot change your sex. Your sex actually is there in every single cell in the body. You have a chromosomal sex, you have genetic sex, you have hormonal sex. You have all sorts of different kinds of psychological, brain sex, they're all different.
That's him cancelled. This bonkers guidance suggests that children as young as 5 could show signs that they are in the wrong body. What the hell does that actually mean? No one is in the wrong body. The other brain-scrambling idea is that biological sex is somehow assigned at birth, depending on the, and I quote, appearance of the infant. Let me help you with that. If there's a Willy, it's a boy. If there's a Mew Mew, it's a girl. I really should have been a doctor, you know. Another grammar school claimed that sex was a person's understanding and experience of their own gender identity. There are no words. My job is to talk, but I've got nothing for you. What am I supposed to say? I'll tell you what I think. I think that schools peddling this nonsense should be placed into special measures, and if they continue brainwashing kids into the cult of gender ideology, they should ultimately be shut down. At best, this is misinformation, quackery, and anti-science. And at worst, it's grooming. This nightmare ideology is embedded in many educational establishments, with small children being asked whether they are a boy or a girl today. Now, of course, once you're an adult, you can identify however you like. It's a free country, and I am a libertarian. I've got close friends who are trans, no problem. But taking children down this road is not only overtly sexual and therefore inappropriate, it can lead them on the path to chemical interventions like puberty blockers and even the removal of reproductive organs. Double mastectomies, you name it, I don't want to go into details. What a sick joke, therefore, that school, where children are there to learn their times tables, to play it, and to mess around with paint, is now a place of such potential harm to them. Now, I grew up with 2 fabulous sisters, and when I was little, I remember a few occasions when they put me in one of their dresses, high heels, makeup, and too much lipstick. If you look at that image just to the side of me, that is me in a slightly more conservative outfit, but there's a skirt and there's a hairband and all the rest of it. That was classic childhood tomfoolery. It was innocent, it was fun, it was silly games. But if something like that happened now, and if I was at the wrong school, or if I had the wrong parents, a judgment might be made that I wasn't a boy, but a girl trapped in a boy's body. And my life journey would have been very, very different. I shudder to think. Similarly, children and young people with autism or depression are regularly being diagnosed as trans. And children who are so-called gender non-conforming, in other words, girly boys or boyish girls, are also being placed on this path when it's likely that they are simply gay. Trans ideology is suffused in our culture now, our corporations, the civil service, the NHS, of course, and most egregiously, the educational establishment. Children are being fed dangerous lies and peddled a wicked fantasy by teachers who should be protecting them, not brainwashing them into a religion which makes no sense and which is full of potential physical and psychological harm. Teachers should be there to teach children, to teach them how to read, how to do sums, and keep them away from anything that could destroy their precious innocence. In too many schools now, the opposite is happening. This is a hellish story, and it pains me even to talk about it. So let this show, Mark Dolan Tonight, be a matter of public record that a crime is being committed on our children in real time, with parents unaware of what is happening to their child at school. Children separated from their families, parents frozen out. If that's not an abusive dynamic, I don't know what is. The backlash from this in years to come, when the damage is done, will be unlimited and colossal. The case for homeschooling grows by the day. So children are being transitioned in this school, right? Little Johnny is now Matilda. He's gone from being a he to a she, and mum and dad don't even know about it. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. Don't forget, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew at 10 o'clock. But let's get the thoughts now of my top pundits. Very excited to be joined this evening by the brilliant political commentator, the one and only Benedict Spence. We also have Rebecca Jane, former deputy leader of UKIP, and columnist and TV personality, the one and only Nina Mishkov. Great to have all three of you with me. Happy Saturday, one and all. Where to start, Nina Mishkov? Parents separated from their children, kids transition at school, mum and dad don't even know about it.
Well, there are rogue teachers of all, you know, can encompass religion, can encompass all sorts of things. But this is against complete government policy. And the report in the Daily Mail kept saying reportedly. So they're not claiming this all as fact. This worries me. My mum was a teacher. She was a very, you know, good Scottish science teacher, and pupils were still, you know, long after she retired, saying how much she'd meant to them and all of that. She taught the Proclaimers biology, by the way. There's a weird fact.
Famous Scottish singing duo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
But it seems to me that in this day and age, you have to accept that people are feeling that they are born into the wrong bodies. There was a very famous journalist called James Morris, who transitioned, this is decades ago, wrote a book about it called Conundrum, and she said that she knew when she was 5 years old, around that time, that she was in the wrong body. So you have to accept that these things happen.
Gender dysphoria, which is a recognised medical status.
Absolutely. But I firmly believe that parents should be told of anything that happens to their child. They are ultimately responsible for their children. Having said that, a parent is not a perfect human being. We all know of cases where teachers are having to deal with primary school children who are not potty trained. The largest single factor for children going into hospital is because of decaying teeth, so they're not getting nutritionally fed, they're not getting hygienically treated. So let's not say that parents are good and teachers are bad. Let's just kind of narrow this down.
Well, Nina raises an interesting point, Rebecca Jane, because perhaps these teachers are doing this for the right reason. They are protecting the children from parents who may not understand or accept the journey that the child is on.
I'm not quite on that boat. I think that the problem is that schools seem to be getting this overwhelming sense of power, and I don't think that schools are going to be happy until they're actually our children's legal guardians. We are parents. You know, and yes, there are some parents who are obviously not understanding and all the rest of it. And I do actually think that children can feel like they are born into the wrong body. But we are the adults and we're there to guide children. That's our role in life. And where do we draw a line?
And they often grow out of it. And I just showed a picture there of myself, aged about 5 or 6, in a skirt with a headband on. There's other images my mum was looking for earlier today. Well, God bless you for that. You know, lipstick, you know, but I probably would have been transitioned by now if it was 2024.
Exactly. You know, what a child says to you at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old may not be the case in future. You know, when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a firewoman, for crying out loud. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Like, it's ludicrous.
Well, I've seen your hose.
Mark.
We'll let that lie.
By the way, only if you've got a filthy mind, would you think that was rude.
If you're not careful, she's going to fireman's lift you right out of the studio.
I've been around her garden. It's very well fed.
Hose is a posh word for tights or stockings, and she's not wearing any.
There you go. That's right. I tell you what, it's getting very personal. Benedict, this is the issue, a duty of care that the teacher feels towards the child to support them to be who they want to be. That's what they're doing, and they're doing it for the right reasons. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's an interesting point to raise the spectre of a lot of children, for example, turning up at school. They're not able to read at a certain level. They're not able to use the lavatory. They're not able to brush their teeth. Clearly, there is a bit of a breakdown in certain sections of society where school does have to step in. But this is actually that is actually basic functions in order to survive as a human being in modern society. Actually, your gender is not necessarily an essential function of that. I think it's actually many very small numbers of people, very small numbers, who end up permanently transitioning and who
the
say
numbers
that
are growing. Many think this is a social contagion, Benedict.
Well, it is a social contagion. You can see the correlation between people identifying as transgender going up and the introduction of the smartphone and social media. You cannot get away from that. And ultimately, I think if you want to have a society that is low trust, that breaks down, where people don't actually trust their institutions anymore, there's no more surefire way than doing this sort of thing behind the backs of parents. And we can say that there are some parents that don't fulfil certain roles. I just don't think that that gives schools the right to say, here is something that is actually not within our remit at all, and if anything will disrupt your education, because it is an incredibly disruptive process if we are actually going to facilitate that, and we're going to indulge that. That's not what a school's for.
OK, well, I think parents should be in charge. Absolutely. What are your thoughts? Mark at gbnews.com. Next up in the big story, as Rishi Sunak strikes a deal with NHS consultants, would a Labour government mean 5 years of union chaos? I'll be asking the fearless Kelvin McKenzie next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate. So
is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Children are being transitioned at schools in England without the parents' knowledge. That's the topic of my big opinion. Well, the emails are coming in thick and fast. Hilary says, Mark, I've been a teacher and am an author and illustrator of children's books. I have therefore studied child psychology. I think this insane fashion of transitioning is going to cause so much mental damage to youngsters. These people, says Steve, are weird. They're freaks, says Steve. I'm an ugly man and sometimes wish I had a pair of boobs to play with. Just because you feel like it doesn't mean you have to do it. Mental problems, not physical. How about this? Hi, Mark. If the child's parents were doing this, the kids will be taken into care. It is child abuse, pure and simple. And last but not least, Dave says, hi, Mark, you've just about said it all in your introduction. What a load of tosh this all is. Keep up the good work. Well, Dave, thank you for that. Let's keep those emails coming. mark@gbnews.com. But it's time now for the big story. And whilst the government have agreed to pay NHS consultants an increased amount to end the threat of strikes, the junior doctors and rail workers continue to threaten to down tools. Are the government right to face down unions seeking inflation-busting pay rises? And would an incoming Labour government fold to the likes of the RMT and the British Medical Association? Let's ask the most fearless journalist in Britain, former editor of The Sun newspaper and founder of TalkSport Radio, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, I think Rishi Sunak deserves some credit for standing his ground with the unions. Would we see the same resolution under Labour?
Absolutely wouldn't. They will throw their hand in at 100 miles an hour. It'll be a shocking aspect of a, hugely powerful Labour government. So let's look at it one by one. On the doctors, the consultants, no wonder they settled. They got a 19% pay hike. We'd all settle for 19%. Many would settle for 9%. Or actually, because it's a monopoly and they belong to a trade union, they can charge whatever they like and they can walk out. When the consultants walked out, that was a new low even for the NHS. So the junior doctors are saying to themselves, right, well, we've now got a sighting shot. We'll give up 35%, but the minimum we'll go for is 19%, and therefore they'll settle for 25%. And Starmer will say, where do I sign? Now we look upon the other aspect of it, which is ASLEF. Now, honestly, I recognise it's a job. I don't believe driving along a straight rail line for 4 days a week. And if you actually threw in their average sick days, they're basically doing about 3 to 3.5 days a week over the year. They get 60,000 for it. They've been offered 65,000. So what do? In each one of the network areas over the country over the next week, they will be on strike. And going to be on. They're going to have an overtime ban for 3 days. They are shockers. The good news is that nobody cares anymore. The ASLEF could stay on strike for 1,000 years, and whereas in my old editing days, this would be a massive story. The train guys going on strike. They can go on strike forever. It doesn't affect us anymore. Why? Because we have now got something called working from home. And we have computers which even conduct these kinds of conversations, so we don't care about them. So I am very much in favour of doing a whopping, which is actually say to them, I tell you what, now comes the time for testers. We're going to lock you out rather than you locking us out. They are using ordinary, innocent people as their kind of great bulwarks for a pay rise. It's a disgrace. But when Labour come in, I mean, they've got a whole load of ideas in the industrial space, which are going to be a nightmare for small businesses anywhere. For instance, one of them being, from the day you start, you are entitled to say whether you want to actually come into the office all the time, right? This is from day one, right? And also on day one, you can also say that actually, do you know what? I'm not sure that my mental health can stand going to work at all. Is there something you can accommodate me with? And this is being brought in by the Conservatives, basically, as well as Labour. Honestly,
turning up to work these days, it would be easier if somebody just sent round a Securicor van round to your house and handed you the money and said, you don't need to bother to do any work right now. We are a poor country who is becoming poorer because, excuse me, our productivity is now worse. What about this? Is now worse on an hourly basis than France. So we used to laugh at France about being idle and all the rest of it. It's our country is in a very difficult state.
Well, Kelvin, you're absolutely right. We've got £2.6 trillion worth of debt. We've got a deficit, which means day-to-day spending, more is going out than comes in. The next time I hear someone say that Britain is a rich country, I'm going to throw up. It really infuriates me. Now, you mentioned Wapping, of course. That was when your former boss, the great Rupert Murdoch, faced down the print unions by relocating to Wapping. Let's talk about the 80s, because you became the editor of The Sun in 1981, when Britain was being held to ransom by the unions, culminating in the miners' strike in 1984. Is there a danger that we could return to those dark days?
Well, it's very difficult to work out what set of workers now can actually have you by the cojones anymore. The miners had our country like that and had won every dispute for literally 30, 40 years. So had the printers, by the way, until they came up against Rupert, in which he said, well, actually, I built another factory down the road and that's your lot. So that was a great moment for anybody who worked in the print during those days. The greatest moment in their lives was seeing these rather nasty, violent lefties being thrown out of work. It was a joy, an absolute joy. Now, today, that's not the same. Who would have guessed that in the 80s, even the doctors would have gone on strike? Who would have even thought that was possible? So I don't believe that we are going to go through that. However, I do recognise a set of circumstances where if you are the one that's writing the cheque for the party that's in power to keep them in power, then they are going to have to pay you back in some manner. And it's quite clear that the Prime Minister of the day, Starmer, I'm not sure how long he'll last, by the way, but will want to repay the trade union movement. It will be a nightmare for our country, in which we will have, I'm afraid I'm so old for this, that I can remember Harold Wilson's Beer and Sandwiches on Number 10, when finally he turned around to Jack Jones and Hugh Scanlon and said, get your tanks off my lawn. And I believe that we're going to face, even although it seems unlikely, we are going to face the fact that trade unions have a much bigger role to play in public life than they have done over the last 14 years.
Now, of course, Kelvin, Labour will argue that the Tories have made a Horlicks of industrial relations over the last couple of years, and that they will work constructively with the unions to give workers the money they deserve. And of course, the nurses, the doctors, the medics, the consultants and the rail workers will argue that they have had real-term pay cuts. But listen, let's get on to another quick story before you go, Kelvin. You went viral this week, and I'm not referring to your robust physical health. You put out a tweet which was seen by over 1 million people, rightly pointing out that Waterloo Station, one of the busiest in the country, was completely empty at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's a Friday morning, it's a working day, demonstrating that the country has ground to a halt. It was a brilliant tweet. Now, you got done by Twitter's community censors, who were very pedantic, challenging the suggestion that it's the busiest train station in Europe. Yeah, that's not the story, is it? The story is that Britain has lost its work ethic.
No, that was obviously put out by some lefty. By the way, they're quite right. They're quite right. The trouble with Waterloo Station is it comes from the southeast, and after COVID, it was #1 in the UK. Before COVID, and then after COVID, because it has so many people commuting to London, it became #2 behind Liverpool Street. So I'm very sorry to those lefties out there. It gave you a victory, which doesn't happen very often, I must be honest with you.
Yeah, but the point stands, doesn't it, Kelvin?
Yeah, the point stands that Waterloo Station, 54 million people a year come into there, and on that particular escalator there was nobody. There was, right, I've got 2 other photos. It had 1 person on the station on the Jubilee line. Well, you know how busy the Jubilee line through Green Park, Bond Street, my God, everywhere, right? And the other one was the underground ticket to go into the underground from the main station, right? That was completely deserted as well. This is a major issue, and it is a working from home issue, right? And I don't entirely blame the workforce. The workforce, all right, there are idiots like the Office of National Statistics who are now saying they're going to go on strike because they're being told they've got to come back to work for 2 days from literally from the other day. Oh, really? Do take it easy in the civil service. Pace yourself. There are big issues out there, matey, right? But not only that, that is all over the nation. Now, it's one of the reasons why the train drivers can't get a pay rise, because actually there's 2 reasons. One, there's no money anyway. And secondly, what they've discovered is that they haven't got the leverage. So you've got these guys from ASLEF and RMT and giving it all of that. Actually, everyone's saying, really, I'm so sorry, I'm working from home.
Kelvin, love it. The clock's against us. You never take a day off. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Fleet Street legend Kelvin Mackenzie. Next up, as it shifts to the left, would Margaret Thatcher even make it into this modern-day Conservative Party? I'll be asking her former top advisor, Niall Gardner, next.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers though pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge off those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, Downing Street has been accused of blocking true blue Conservative candidates from standing in the general election as it wages a battle for the future of the Tory party. Those on the right of the party believe that Rishi Sunak is trying to purge it of those who support low-tax, small-state conservatism so that it will be dominated by centrists after the election. Writing in The Telegraph today, their top columnist Alison Pearson goes as far as to argue that even a young Margaret Thatcher wouldn't get on the candidate list in today's Tory party. Is this true? Well, let's speak to the former aide to Margaret Thatcher, foreign policy analyst and contributor to the Telegraph newspaper, Niall Gardner. Niall, Margaret Thatcher famously led the Conservatives for over a decade, winning 3 landslide election victories and transforming Britain. How has the Conservative Party changed since she was in charge?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for having me on the show today. And I think, unfortunately, the Conservative Party has changed dramatically over the course of the last 2 or 3 decades since the end of the Thatcher era. And it has changed for the worse. The party has shifted significantly leftwards on many fronts recently, especially under Rishi Sunak. I think under Boris Johnson, there was a reversal of the sort of leftward trend. But with Boris's exit and then, of course, the removal of Liz Truss, the party has moved back to its sort of leftward shifting trajectory. And I think that Margaret Thatcher would be hugely dismayed with the direction the Conservative Party is moving today. And I think she would be greatly saddened to see the current state of the Conservative Party now heading, according to most polls, towards a historic defeat unless things are dramatically changed. And it's very disappointing to see where the Conservative Party is today, dominated basically by what Margaret Thatcher would have called wets, lefties, really, anti-Thatcherites. And I think that the Conservative Party is in a downward spiral and trajectory. Hopefully, after the election, there will be new Thatcherite leadership that can restore conservatism to the Conservative Party, which is greatly needed.
Why have the Tories shifted to the centre, do you think, Niall? Is it the influence of Tony Blair? Is it the idea that the centre ground is where elections are won and lost?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that Blair's election victories certainly had a big impact upon the Conservatives' own direction. And I think the Cameron years certainly represented a significant shift to the centre ground, even towards the left, actually, under David Cameron. And it's absolutely astonishing that Cameron is now back in the cabinet as Foreign Secretary, lecturing the Israelis about how to conduct their war against Hamas. And I think the fact that you have Cameron back in the cabinet is an illustration of just how far the Conservative government has fallen today. And we need another Thatcherite revolution inside the Conservative Party. It really needs to have a fundamental shake-up, really. And I have to say that at the moment, the outlook is incredibly grim. The Conservatives can only win if they stand upon a platform of conservative policies. Otherwise, their own voters will abandon them, as they are doing now. Of course, many are moving towards a reform. But large numbers of Conservative Party voters cannot see any value in today supporting the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has to rediscover its Thatcherite and Churchillian roots. It has to move to the right if it has any hope of winning elections again.
Let's see if we can, Niall, bring in my top pundits to join the conversation. Journalist and writer Benedict Spence, political commentator Rebecca Jane, and columnist and television personality Nina Mishkov. Benedict, if Margaret Thatcher was in the Conservative Party, how would she be characterised at this moment in time? And would she have any chance of becoming leader?
I mean, I think she'd have a fantastic chance of becoming leader, but that's just because all it takes is for somebody to throw their hat in the ring, and that person is...
Just to interrupt you briefly, Benedict, wouldn't Margaret Thatcher, if she was on the Tory backbenches, now be labelled an extremist or far-right?
Extremist in terms of her economic policy, maybe. I think Liz Truss has done a wonderful job of setting fire to the reputation of Thatcherite Tories. That's not necessarily a reflection on the ideology itself, and I think a lot more to do with the calibre of the Prime Minister in question. But actually, I think that that's a much more important question. What we're talking about now is, the sort of who is going to be the candidates in the next general election. Are they going to be sort of, one nation Tories? Are they going to be, yellow Tories, as they're called, basically indistinguishable from Liberal Democrats, or are they going to be further to the right? Actually, what I think is far more important in many ways is having MPs who are vaguely competent, because actually the thing that we've found throughout this period of Conservative rule, the sheer number of Conservative MPs who are not up to the task of being MPs, let alone ministers, forget them being ministers, members. Actually, a lot of them, whatever their stripes may be, are not, I think, what members of the public would come to expect of their MPs. So
Rebecca
actually, I think
Jane,
if we're talking about actually getting back support, I think people just want to see an MP who, even if they differ on them on certain things, you get the sense that that person can at least do the job.
That's do the job and can stand for something. Rebecca Jane and Nina, briefly, if you can. I'll start with you, Rebecca Jane. A very good emails come in from Basil, who says, "Hi, Mark, it's the members that make a political party, not the people at HQ. If HQ ignore the wishes of its members, then that party does not deserve to survive. The Conservative Party doesn't seem to understand why its former members are defecting to Reform UK and your former party of UKIP."
No, they're not, Mark. They're going over to Reform, but they're not going over to UKIP. That's a lot of nonsense. No, it's completely true. At the end of the day, the Conservative Party are not doing the will of the people, and that's the bit that they're missing. We've got to take all of this back to basics. Nobody actually votes for Rishi Sunak because they think he's a competent leader. People are scared to vote for alternative parties. People are scared to vote for Reform because it's not about the person that you're actually putting up in a political campaign. It's about who's got the most money and the biggest marketing campaign.
OK.
Scrap the system and start again.
Briefly, Nina, your thoughts on how Margaret Thatcher would be characterised if she was around today? Would she be lumped in with Suella Braverman?
Well, she probably would be, but I don't know. I don't know what planet you're on in deifying Margaret Thatcher in this way. We're still living with the damage that she's wreaked. Look at our water. She sold off. She put profits before people, and we're still. Look at the housing crisis, selling off council houses so that, and not building enough to replace them. We are still reaping the damage, and it makes me laugh. It makes me weep actually to think that she caused so much that's wrong with this country at the moment, and yet she's still seen as this glorious leader. She may have been a leader. She was a strong woman, but that's where it begins and ends for me.
OK. Niall, I've only got a couple of seconds. Who would the Thatcherite heir apparent be in the current Conservative Party, do you think?
Well, I think just very briefly, if I could respond to Nina's comments, absolutely outrageous, frankly. Margaret Thatcher, of course, was a truly great leader. She defeated, of course, the scourge of socialism. She left Britain in a far better place than she found it in the first place. And I think the British people should be hugely grateful, of course, to Margaret Thatcher for her leadership. With regard to future leaders of the Conservative Party, I think there are several very strong contenders, especially Suella Braverman and also Priti Patel as well. I think there are two very strong conviction politicians, strong Thatcherites. They are far more conservative in every respect than Rishi Sunak. And I think the Conservative Party has to move to the right if it has any hope of long-term survival and winning future elections. It has to ditch all these wishy-washy liberal-style wet policies and adopt real conservative policies again.
Niall, always a thrill to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Margaret Thatcher's former aide, foreign policy analyst, contributor to The Telegraph, Niall Gardner. Next up, don't forget, at 10 o'clock, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew and my Take a 10. You won't want to miss it. Sparks will fly. But next up, the Mail newspaper are reporting that dogs and cats are getting sick after Easter. What's going on? I'll be asking TV vet Dr. Scott Miller. He's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told you.
We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5. It'd be MI5 to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote because that's
not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives, and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean, how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this and they will just say enough, because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment and obviously our houses are full of items we bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them
Yeah,
from
that
it.
was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
The point is, though, go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up in my Take at 10, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew. You won't want to miss it. But first, Mark Meets. And this evening, one of Britain's best-loved TV vets, the star of ITV's This Morning, as well as his own very popular programme on More 4, Vet on the Hill, Dr. Scott Miller. Dr. Miller, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. You were born in Brisbane, Australia, to British parents. When did you realise that animals were going to be your life and career?
Good evening, Mark. Look, I realised that quite early, actually. I was the age of 7 and I was camping in the outback with my family, and I crept out of the tent very early in the morning and was sort of a sea of red nothingness, and I saw a little animal on the horizon, and so I thought that I would see how close I could get to it, and it was kind of the closest thing I've ever had to a sort of religious experience when I got to actually touch this wild animal. And I think it was at that point that I realised that I didn't want to be a paleontologist anymore because all the dinosaurs were dead. So I wanted to be a vet. So from the age of 7, just kept going until I achieved my dream.
Well, you began your veterinary career at the largest animal hospital in Australia, the RSPCA clinic in Sydney. What brought you to the UK?
So, as you say, my parents were both British. So I was born in Australia, but I had a British passport, and I'd studied longer than most of my friends. At the age of 24, I thought, you know what, I'm going to head back to the home country. I thought it was only going to be 2 years, and here I am over 25 years later. So it's not been too bad for me at all.
A really worrying story today. I don't know if it crossed your radar, Scott, about pets that have been poorly after Easter. They've been eating all sorts of things, not just chocolate, but sultanas, bits of cake, and God knows what else. These festive occasions are a bit of a problem for pets, aren't they?
Yeah, they can be quite challenging. I think because we treat ourselves, we feel that we should be treating our animals, but because they are a completely different species to us, we do sometimes forget that some things which are perfectly fine for us can be toxic for them. So to say sultana is the classic, everyone knows about chocolate, but there's more sort of sleuth-like toxins. For example, there's certain types of sugars. Xylitol, for example, it's an artificial sweetener that's present in a lot of different foods that we eat. But it can cause significant hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, which can be really dangerous for dogs. Onions as well is a very common thing found in a lot of foods that we like, and is also toxic for dogs. And then there's certain things that we bring into the household which are very toxic for cats. Flowers, for example, certain types of lilies that might brush against they lick it off their fur, and that can really frazzle their kidneys. So yeah, it's a tricky old world. We ask them to come into our lives, but we do have to be mindful of things that maybe aren't so good for them.
Well, indeed, you're a brand ambassador for the dog and cat food company Barking Heads, who do a brilliant job, very popular, good range of food. Of course, other pet food brands are available. What should we be feeding our cats and dogs? What's the best diet?
Oh, that's a controversial one there, Mark. Look, I think as long as it's completely balanced, then I'm happy. As a vet, I just want to make sure that animals are getting all the vitamins and minerals that they need to maintain a healthy lifestyle. When it comes to different types of food, some people are really keen on the raw food diet. Other people just are happy with kibble. But for a lot of people out there who are really struggling with, paying for their own food, let alone paying for dogs' food and cats' food, as long as it says completely balanced on the packaging, then I think you're absolutely fine to feed it to your pets. $1 million question: are you a cat or a dog person? I'm going to sit firmly on the fence on that one, to the point I get splinters. I've got two of each, and absolutely love them both. They have different facets to their personalities that I love and cherish. So yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence if that's okay. You've had to do serious operations on much-loved animals whilst being filmed by a TV crew. How do you handle pressure like that? Well, I mean, I think doing the job for 25 years has meant that I'm pretty cool under pressure. And the job in itself is highly pressurized. I'm actually finding myself, I'm here in a hotel room, so I'm here to help a friend who has just finished circumnavigating the UK. He is now at the point where his dog needs to pass on, and so I'm here to kind of support him in doing that. The job can be really difficult and really challenging at times. Filming it, I think, for me, is a way for me to invite people into the world that I inhabit, and hopefully get them onto my side of thinking, which is that animals are just as important as people, and we should be respecting them, caring for them, and cherishing them, because they just add quality to all of our lives. Listen, I've only got a couple of seconds. What's your view of designer pets and all of the breeding that goes on? The word designer and pets shouldn't go side by side to start with, and there's a lot of breeding of animals that's all about looks and not about personality. And I think we all know that in all relationships, focusing on looks and not personality is a very dangerous idea. So animals should be bred to be able to breathe and to be healthy, not by the way that they look. Scott, I hope your friend's pet is going to be okay. What a thrill to have you on the show. Do come and see us again soon. You can find Scott, let's have a look, at Dr. Scotty M on Instagram. Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. Catch up soon. Next up, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew in no uncertain terms in my Take at 10.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers though pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge of those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain, across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, how do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? I'll be dealing with the disgraced royal who is the subject of two major Hollywood films, one of which is out this weekend. My unapologetic verdict on Randy Andy at 10. You won't want to miss it. And after a tough year, finally some good news. Charles and Camilla celebrate their 19th wedding anniversary. Reaction to this great royal romance with the Queen of US Royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. There you go, Mark Dolan Tonight is your perfect Saturday night in. Crack open a beer, uncork a bottle of Pinot Grigio, or fire up the kettle and tear open the custard creams, because we've got work to do. I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew in 2 minutes' time. I'm not pulling my punches. First, GB News royalty with the headlines. Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mark. The top stories this evening. Scotland has 18 regional flood alerts in place and 43 flood warnings as Storm Kathleen continues to sweep across parts of the country. Around 12,000 households in Ireland remain without power. This evening, after the storm swept across the island today, over 140 flights were cancelled as the Met Office issued a yellow warning for wind. Gusts of up to 70 miles per hour have been felt in Northern Ireland and the west of Britain. Along with the strong winds, though, a provisional highest temperature of the year so far was recorded of 20.9 degrees Celsius in Suffolk. Two planes on the tarmac at Heathrow Airport collided today, causing minor damage to their wings. The empty Virgin Atlantic 787 was being towed from the stand at Terminal 3 when it clipped the wingtip of a British Airways Airbus, which had over 100 passengers on board. Nobody was injured. Virgin Atlantic says the plane had just landed and was being transported to a different part of the airfield. The airline says it's carrying out a full and thorough investigation. A Conservative MP says he was the first whistleblower to alert police to the parliamentary honey trap sexting scandal. Bosworth MP Dr Luke Evans said he was the victim of cyber flashing as the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into unsolicited messages with Leicestershire Police. On Thursday, Tory MP William Ragg told The Times he'd sent intimate pictures of himself to someone on a gay dating app and was then manipulated into providing colleagues' phone numbers. So far, around a dozen MPs, staff and journalists are known to have been targeted. A women's rights rally in Edinburgh was disrupted by a transgender rights counter-protest today. The Let Women Speak rally came just 5 days after Scotland's new hate crime law came into effect. Both events remained peaceful, though, with no arrests made. That's according to Police Scotland. The legislation faces criticism over its impact of freedom of speech and concerns that it could be used to silence some views, including from those who advocate for women-only spaces. And today marks the 50th anniversary of ABBA's famous win at the Eurovision Song Contest, which elevated the Swedish pop group to international fame. Their fans gathered today at London's Waterloo station to pay tribute by singing the song that won them the contest. ABBA won the European music competition with their smash hit Waterloo in 1974. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Tatiana. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. After a tough year, finally, some good news. Charles and Camilla celebrate their 19th wedding anniversary. Reaction to this great royal romance with the Queen of US royal reporting Kinsey Schofield. Plus, at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's Pundit. With me this evening, we have journalist and writer Benedict Spence, political commentator and broadcaster Rebecca Jane, and newspaper columnist and TV personality, bar none, Nina Mishkov. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. And news of a potential coup at number 10. Regicide at the top. Is Rishi Sunak on the insider? That's the 5. So, a packed hour, and those papers are coming. But first, my take at 10. How do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew, who is currently featuring in more Hollywood movies than Tom Bloody Cruise? Netflix have just launched a movie called Scoop, a drama which gives an insider account of how the team at BBC Newsnight secured that infamous interview with Andrew, in which his efforts to silence the allegations around his sex life backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, versatile actor Michael Sheen plays Prince Andrew on Amazon Prime in a very royal scandal, which charts the story leading up to that TV appearance. Who could blame Netflix and Amazon for seizing on this material? In the BBC Newsnight interview, instead of distancing himself from convicted paedophile Epstein, Andrew said that he didn't regret their friendship because it, quote, led to opportunities that were actually very useful. Well, I'm sure it did. He also admitted to staying in creepy Epstein's New York mansion for several days because it was a convenient place to stay. This was the son of Queen Elizabeth II. He could have stayed anywhere in New York with a budget for a huge room at any of its finest hotels. And in the interview, Andrew admitted that he took residence at the billionaire's pad after Epstein had served time for soliciting a minor for the purpose of prostitution. Charming. And when asked about the many underage girls that photographed leaving the billionaire's house, Prince Andrew said, as far as I was aware, they were staff. Yes, Andrew, but what jobs were they doing? They were more likely on the job. Now, in the interview, he questioned the accuracy of that photograph with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, confirming that it is him in the picture, but not necessarily his hand. So what's going on? Did he use a stunt double? And hilariously, he denied dancing with Virginia Giuffre at a London nightclub because he says he has a rare condition in which he cannot sweat. Well, he's sweating now, isn't he? As these movies heap more embarrassment and shame on the family. Now, Prince Andrew denies all allegations made against him and has settled for several £1 million against Giuffre, but without acknowledging any guilt or culpability. He may well be 100% innocent of any wrongdoing. He could be the victim of a terrible stitch-up. He could. Who knows? But with his poorly judged actions, it's very clear that this right royal numpty has brought this crisis on himself. And given that 2 major Hollywood films are dedicated to the story, the damage that this man has reaped on the monarchy, his family and the country is there for all to see. So, what was his response this weekend? Well, he was photographed pouncing around his royal estate on a horse, without a care in the world. It's been take from this guy since day one, receiving a multi-million-pound mansion from his mother when he married Sarah Ferguson, only to flog it years later for a huge profit. Pocketing 17 million quid from the sale of a Swiss chalet. Nice work if you can get it. Darting around the world at the taxpayers' expense as some kind of self-appointed business ambassador. What does Prince Andrew know about running a business? He couldn't run a bath. A butler probably does it for him. Prince Andrew has all the financial acumen of Katie Price. Good friend of mine, Katie. I probably shouldn't lump her in with this numpty. So what next for Andrew? Well, a few weeks ago, I suggested that he should remarry Sarah Ferguson and take a path back to respectability, discreetly serving the nation behind the scenes and trying to repair the damage. And talk about damage. As well as being relieved of his public royal duties, he lost his military honours, most recently passed over for promotion to the rank of Admiral. And most embarrassingly, he was absent from the official photos of his eldest daughter, Princess Beatrice's wedding. He didn't even catch the bouquet. I'll be honest, I feel sorry for his 2 daughters, who are fabulous girls and who have been through hell. Meanwhile, their sweat-free old man is still rattling around his 30-room Windsor home, the Royal Lodge. Let's be honest, he's the world's poshest squatter, and he's still living high on the hog. Courtiers, security, cars, banquets, you name it. Although our dynamic new king has cut his ludicrous annual budget of £250,000. Teaching the Queen's apparently favourite and, in my view, spoiled son that actions have consequences. Prince Andrew could have styled out this crisis if he had some humility and capacity for self-reflection. But a top royal insider has told me in confidence that there is no well of goodwill among family members or indeed the staff at the palace, who I'm told can't stand him. My source, who couldn't be better connected, tells me that Andrew is notoriously pompous and rude. Now, these are allegations for which I don't have tangible evidence. It's what I've been told by an insider. You can decide for yourself. Ultimately, you reap what you sow. Back in the day, this horse-loving royal was a stallion. Now he's a donkey, and he's heading straight for the knacker's yard. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. I'll get to your email shortly. But first, tonight's top pundits, journalist and writer Benedict Spence, political commentator Rebecca Jane, and columnist and TV personality Nina Mishkov. Rebecca Jane, your reaction to the latest drama surrounding Prince Andrew.
I watched it today on Netflix, so the streaming services are available. We were talking about this actually before. It's a nice little drama. It didn't particularly tell us anything that we didn't already know, but, you know, give it a watch. The bottom line is, He is what we all know. He's completely deluded and stupid, and the best way to solve a problem like, you know, Andrew is to put him on a boat and send him off to France. And that's pretty much all you can do with him. He needs to completely just realise what he's done. But the problem is he doesn't realise it. And for me, that just shows narcissistic tendencies. So off you pop. We don't want anything to do with you.
Well, I tend to agree with you. The voice of common sense, as always, Rebecca Jane. Nina Mishkov, am I being too hard on Prince Andrew? After all, he's never been found guilty of anything.
No, you're not being hard enough, frankly. I mean, the really worrying thing in the last couple of months, since the royal family has been so sadly depleted on the kind of public stage, is that there's been the odd occasion where he's being sort of trotted out. There was the memorial service for King Constantine of Greece, and for lack of anybody else, he and Camilla, I refuse to call her the Queen, she's always Camilla, well, they led the royal party, what was left of them, into the chapel, and there's been the odd article in the Daily Mail, sort of that sort of area, trying to say, well, you know, if he remarried Fergie, he could be rehabilitated and he'd be quite safe. It just doesn't wash. It's just awful.
Nina Mishkov. Nobody gets cancelled on this show, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion. But did you just say on the national television and radio airwaves that Camilla is not our Queen?
She is your Queen. I don't care to call her the Queen. When I hear the name the Queen, I think of the Queen. And Camilla, to me, is not my Queen, frankly.
Nina, that could be very deeply offensive to many of my viewers and listeners. Constitutionally, she's my Queen, and she's your Queen too.
She's the King's wife.
Why are you so disparaging of Camilla? Why don't you grant her the dignity of the title that was approved in advance by Elizabeth before she passed?
No, it wasn't. It was not. That's completely wrong.
She said that Charles can call her the Queen Consort.
The Queen Consort is very different. And if she was the Queen Consort, I would acknowledge her as the Queen
Consort. Schmonsort.
No,
she's the Queen.
No.
She's the King's wife. I think that's deeply offensive,
The late
Nina.
Queen said Queen Consort, and if she'd meant the Queen, she would have said the Queen, but she said Queen Consort. And as soon as Charles could, he made her the Queen.
All right. Well, of course, opinions will differ on this show. That's the magic of the programme. What do you think about this, Benedict? I mean, poor old Prince Andrew can't sink any lower, can he? Now Hollywood are getting their teeth into him.
I mean, never say never that he can't sink any lower. Don't sort of preempt it by saying that there's no other depths that he could plumb. I'm sure that he could come up with something.
Nina, do you know something?
If given £250,000 and plenty of time to do nothing else but think of a way to plumb further depths, I'm sure he could. I think the first thing that actually has to be said, of course, about this new Netflix drama is it's based on a book, a rather good book, which is sort of more telling you about sort of the behind-the-scenes aspect to it. It's not meant to be a sort of a replaying of the interview itself, because nothing can quite capture the sort of the rather delicious horror of watching it in real time. And even if you go back again, you're never quite inoculated from what it is to actually experience that.
Do you remember, Benedict, were you sitting on your sofa that Saturday night with your toes curling up inside your shoes going, I can't believe it, I can't believe it?
It was one of those, I think, where almost everybody across the country had the exact same physical responses, where you couldn't
grabbing the cushion and going, no, make it stop.
Couldn't believe what you were seeing. Didn't think that it could get any worse, and then it did. It get worse. It was a magnificent moment of televisual history.
Yeah.
Do we feel sorry for him?
No.
Does he have a function? No. It's rather difficult to know what to do with him. I think seeing him trotted out again, I think it really doesn't. It doesn't go down very well, does it? It doesn't sit well.
That was terrible, because he stood there like a Cheshire cat, leading the way. Off you go. We don't want you back. And for you to think that we do, and for you to stand there like the Cheshire Cat, is absolutely crazy.
Indeed.
I think you're right, he's deluded.
Deluded. He's crackers.
And the thing is, his entire life until 2 years ago, he was the favourite, because he was the Queen's favourite, and he was the chosen son, as far as she was concerned. And long after he'd been disgraced, the Queen still made it her place to treat him as if nothing had gone wrong. So he's had, long enough now to understand what position he's in, but he is, as you say, deluded.
Well, he does like his positions, but that's another story. Listen, your reaction to my take at 10, mark at gbnews.com. Be careful, Nina, manhandling a GB News cushion. You don't know who's been sat on one of those things. After a tough year, finally some good news. Charles and Camilla celebrate their 19th wedding anniversary. Reaction to this great royal romance with the Queen of US Royal reporting Kinsey Schofield. Plus, how is this massive Netflix film about Prince Andrew going down in America? Kinsey has all the answers. She's next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the character, have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
That are really just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have
gay
been
icon.
transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Oh, don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, in an explosive piece of television, our brilliant pundit Nina Mishkov has said that Queen Camilla is not her queen at all, and will not use the word queen. This from Julie, who says, well said, Nina. Camilla is not my queen either. I couldn't agree more. I'm 100% not offended by your correct comment. How about this from Barbara? Mark, that Nina lady is so horrible. Where did you get her? Are you feeling the pinch? Well, Barbara, Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion, which is why we love having Nina on, as well as all of my pundits. And last but not least, Siobhan, who says, hi, Mark, you've just insulted many of us who adore donkeys. How dare you say that Andrew is a donkey? Donkeys are beautiful creatures, and I, for one, support the various donkey sanctuaries who do amazing work to help these lovely animals. Well, Siobhan, I'll give you that. Prince Andrew, far inferior to a donkey. It's time now for US News with the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political debate, Kinsey Schofield, who, of course, Kinsey is a race-winning thoroughbred. Kinsey, let's talk about reaction to this Netflix film, Scoop, which, of course, is being shown around the world. How's it going down in America? It's all about Prince Andrew, of course.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think that on Rotten Tomatoes, it has incredible scores, over 70% with critics and just regular viewers like you and I. You know, it is a fascinating film. And I think that for the most part, you know, you watch Billy Piper as Sam McAllister and you know, you see the ins and outs of you know, really good journalism. And it kind of inspires you to get up and do something with your day.
Well, most definitely. I think that's the whole point, isn't it? This is going to be watched by many. Princess Beatrice, Andrew's daughter, is upset about the drama. Tell me more. What do you know, Kinsey?
Well, this was a comment by Jenny Bond. I think the concern is that she will be upset by her portrayal in this, and it was actually fine. She's in blink and you'll miss her in the film, but you know, it does remind people that she did have a hand in the negotiations to secure this interview with Buckingham Palace. You know, there was a little bit of encouragement on her end, and I'm sure she would like that, you know, part of history to slowly disappear, to go away. I'm sure she'd rather not be associated with that train wreck. Also with reports from the Daily Beast in the United States about how both Princess Eugenie and Beatrice would be willing to come back and help out the family as things have gotten tough for them health-wise. You know, they don't want these types of incidents brought up again. If that's true, that they are eager to help out wherever they can, this is, you know, not beneficial to that argument.
Well, most definitely, as I pointed out in my take at 10, I'm a huge admirer of Beatrice and Eugenie and their mother, Sarah, as well, who's been through a tough time health-wise. Let's have some good news, shall we, Kinsey? Charles and Camilla celebrate a special anniversary.
Yes, their 19th wedding anniversary is coming up on April 9th. And I didn't realize that they announced that they were going to be engaged just 2 months before they got married. However, they knew each other for 35 years prior to this wedding, but they were eager. They were ready to go. And King Charles's former butler, Grant Harold, has said that he has no doubt that these two are going to spend a quiet day together on April 9th behind closed doors. He says they'll probably have a romantic dinner between the two of them. He says they're not big on celebrations, which is something as an American I just can't comprehend, because look at that video. Every time I see these two out and about, they seem surrounded by people. There is a big celebration. So I typically associate them with large celebrations, that pomp and circumstance. But Grant says that he expects it to be marked privately with perhaps a gift exchange. And since it's the 19th wedding anniversary, perhaps it's something bronze.
Just on the subject of Camilla, my viewers and listeners have been very upset by what my top pundit, Nina Mishkov, has had to say about Queen Camilla. Nina Mishkov has just said on the sofa of Mark Dolan tonight that Camilla is not her queen. She won't use the word queen. The email console has basically melted in response to that. There's a few people agree, many that don't, and they think that Nina has been deeply offensive about Camilla. What's your reaction?
I think that there's a place and a time to have a debate like this. I lost 2 family members to cancer last year, and anytime I think about it, I just sob. And this family is going through a lot right now. Yeah. And I think that we need to have respect for them, and we need to respect the difficult time that they're having. And it's a cruel discussion to have, and it's unnecessary to have right now.
And Kinsey, I can hear the emotion in your voice. You've been devoted to the royal family since you were a little girl, and like so many of my viewers and listeners, you're feeling quite fragile at the moment. The family have been through so much, and as you say, we just wish them all well. Shall we talk about a bit of pomp and pageantry? Buckingham Palace to have a very special guard shortly. Tell me more.
Isn't this going to be fun? Now, this is something that we can look forward to on Monday. It's going to be to celebrate 120 years of friendship. At Buckingham Palace, it's going to be guarded for the first time ever by French troops. This is during a drill enthusiastically approved by King Charles. According to the Daily Express, and it's April of 1904 where this agreement was made between the United Kingdom and the French Republic, settling a number of controversial matters, and it signified a historic understanding between France and Britain. Onlookers are going to see 32 French soldiers parade around the grounds of Buckingham Palace, and it's going to be so fun to see. I wish I could be there, but I'll be checking social media to get a live look.
Most definitely. Listen, one of the most famous comedians in the world, Sacha Baron Cohen, famous for the Ali G Show, Borat, many other hits, is to split. What's going on?
You know, this looks like it has a lot to do with the Rebel Wilson allegations. Now, Sasha says that he split with his wife over a year ago. They've been trying to deal with it privately. Insiders say that some of it also stems from the fact that they moved to Australia so that they could be closer to her family. But really, I think that these Rebel Wilson allegations that have come out about emotional and sexual abuse while on the set of one of his movies has negatively affected his brand. He's threatening defamation. He's trying to get the book not to be released in certain countries. And obviously, it's taken a toll on his marriage to where they've decided they want to publicly split because she does not want to be associated with it anymore.
Most definitely. Of course, sad to see them break up, and Sacha Baron Cohen denies the allegations made in that book. Kinsey, look, great to have you every week. It's always the highlight of Mark Dolan tonight on a Saturday, and emotions are running high when it comes to all matters royal, and I really appreciate your emotive and personally engaged reporting on the big royal stories every week.
Thank you, sir.
Take care, and we'll catch you in a week's time. Next up, tomorrow's papers with full pundit reaction, plus is a coup against Rishi Sunak in the offing? Could he be gone in weeks? We'll hear from a top Westminster insider in the last word. But the paper's next. See you in 2.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers though pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge off those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
let me tell you that my pundit Nina Mishkov has really put a cat among the pigeons. She's been on air earlier this evening in response to my take at 10, saying that while she likes Camilla, perhaps admires her, she's not her queen. Well, the emails have come in thick and fast. This from Anthony: I mostly find Nina Mishkov's views objectionable, but I agree there was only one queen, and Camilla is simply the king's wife. Nina is a ninny. We all love Queen Camilla, says Pat in Newcastle. I'm afraid you're wrong in your views about Camilla, Mark. She is definitely not queen, but queen consort, as declared by Elizabeth. I totally agree with Nina. And last but not least on this, from Sandra, who says, Mark, for goodness sake, leave Prince Andrew alone. We've had enough. The media just can't help themselves wallowing in this story. Of course, a couple of you have also added that Andrew has not been found guilty of any crimes. So, look, thanks for that. Keep those emails coming. Mark at gbnews.com. Next up, we're going to do the papers. Sebastian, where shall we start? Nice to have Sebastian back in the gallery. He's been in rehab for 3 months now and he's looking $1 million. The Observer: Cameron warns of Gaza famine as Navy sent to aid the starving. And buy now, pay later risks a £30 billion credit crisis. Sunday Telegraph: UK failing to prepare for war, say ex-ministers. Leftist anti-Israel protests are close to fascism, says the iconic Jewish comedy actress Maureen Lipman. Children risk psychological harm if allowed to change gender, a landmark trans review warns. Well, that was exactly the topic of tonight's Big Opinion, which our excellent digital team have just put up as a video on Twitter. A game-changing UTI vaccine stops infections for 9 years. That's a urinary tract infections. Good news for the millions who suffer from it. A vaccine we can all get behind. And farmers' support for Tories is not a given, says the head of the National Farmers Union. Mail now, the Mail on Sunday. In her own tweets, the proof that Rayner has been lying. This is explosive. Angela Rayner's claims to have not broken any rules over her property dealings have been blown apart by a Mail on Sunday investigation into her real home. Labour's deputy leader has insisted for weeks that for the first 5 years of her marriage, her principal property was a house in Stockport. Well, listen, it seems that there's a case to answer there. Glenn Owen, their respected political editor, who certainly thinks he's got a story. Sunday Times: a stranger's message hit my phone. It was the Westminster honey trapper. Also, Britain's support for Israel is not unconditional, warns Cameron. Glum old Duke of York, photograph there of Prince Andrew, who's been very much the hot topic this hour on the show. He's been out horse riding whilst a new film about him lands on Netflix. Drivers pay £2 billion a year to councils for parking is the other story in the Sunday Times. Sun on Sunday now. Gang hit Isaac home. Newcastle United striker Alexander Isak's home has been hit by raiders. They stole a car at the £100 million rated Swedish international's luxury pad in Northumberland. Real shame there. Awful crime. Of course, so much burglary goes unprosecuted in 2024. The Sunday Mirror: Starmer on 4 years as Labour leader. You can trust us, we have changed. Soap in budgeting row, Corrie cost of living crisis. Nice headline. Cash-strapped Corrie bosses have sparked panic on set by slashing the number of stars in each storyline to save money. Daily Star Sunday: boffins, they watch our every move and even tune into the footy on telly. Psycho seagulls copying humans. What's next? I tell you. Well, we're all birds of a feather here on Mark Dolan tonight because I've got my top pundits with me. I'm delighted to have the excellent journalist and writer Benedict Spence, political commentator Rebecca Jane, and dangerously controversial columnist and TV personality Nina Mishkov, who, Nina, I should point out, a good percentage of my viewers agree with you that Camilla is not our queen.
Well, there you are. I mean, you have me on here to speak the truth.
Definitely. Well, that's your truth and you're entitled to it. Let's get to some political truths now, if we can. How about this story in the Mail on Sunday, Rebecca Jane? In her own tweets, the proof that Angela Rayner has been lying. Now, this is a very complicated story. She had a council house. She sold it at a profit. there was some debate about what her primary address was. She may or may not have evaded capital gains tax of a couple of £1,000s, but it's not about the amount of money, is it? It's about whether she misled the public and her own boss, Keir Starmer, in regard to this story.
Well, based on this little article here, so the problem with this article, they're saying that they've trolled through all of her social media and her pictures and everything else, and because she claims that she never lived at that address, but yet there's a picture of her from years ago saying just got home. Am I surprised? No. Absolutely not. Labour is just as bad as the Conservative Party for lying at every opportunity. Do I personally, in my personal opinion, think that she's guilty? Yes, I do. And if the first thing they teach you in law school, when we look at our government and our systems, is ministerial responsibility. If you lie, you stand down. Ta-da.
Now, Benedict Spence, Angela Rayner has denied any wrongdoing. She's had top experts looking at her case. She's not found to have acted inappropriately. Similarly, she's got the support of her boss, Keir Starmer. But here's the truth. The story won't go away.
It won't go away, and I mean, that's correct, because obviously the Labour Party is likely to win the next general election, as and when that may be, if we ever get around to having one. So, you know, this is somebody who is going to wield quite a bit of power, and it is therefore right that, you know, focus is put onto that person's affairs. I mean, it was interesting that you said that, though, that she has the support of her boss, Keir Starmer, and I wonder if actually she does necessarily, because actually throughout his sort of time as leader, she has been, I wouldn't say a constant thorn in the side, but she's always there as a sort of a champion of the slightly further to the left of the party, and is often sort of touted up as an alternative potential leader. I know that she's a bit of a darling of Westminster people, because they think that that's what people in the north are like. She's a very good sort of pastiche of that. But nonetheless, you know, she is a very able politician. But I do think that she has been sort of posited as a bit of a leadership threat, potentially. I think the Labour Party is in for a very difficult couple of years when it gets in. You know, that's because of the economic and social situation it's going to inherit. I think Sir Keir Starmer's popularity won't necessarily last as long as he might like.
What popularity?
Well, right now he's leading in the polls. I think you know exactly what I mean. He's going to win a landslide.
Popular.
No, but he's going to win a landslide. And I think that any sort of support for the Labour Party will eke away, and then you will get the calls rather quickly about changing in direction. And I think something like Angela Rayner would be a viable, or seen as by some members of the Labour Party, a viable alternative. So does she necessarily have the support of Sir Keir Starmer? Yes, in theory, in public, but I'm not sure that he'd be too disappointed at the idea of his deputy being taken down a peg or two, especially given, of course, she's the first person to go on air about Tory sleaze, Tory corruption. She's always the first person out there. So I'm sure he's probably secretly rather happy that this has happened.
There is no love lost between the two of them, and of course Keir Starmer infamously tried to fire her and then gave her more jobs after a backlash. Nina Mishkov, Benedict Spence has given us a bit of a story there. Is Keir Starmer popular?
Well, you know, the trouble is, and I don't vote Labour, the trouble is that he has no charisma whatsoever.
No.
This is the big problem. He has done an absolutely brilliant job in 4 years of pushing to one side the Tory left. He's kind of holding them down. He's got rid of them and he's holding them down.
Oh, you mean the hard left of the Labour Party?
The hard left of the Labour Party.
Right.
He's dealt with them, and in a fairly short space of time, actually, and he's kind of steaming ahead. And the trouble is, he has no charisma as a personality, and people just don't warm to him. And this is a big stumbling block. But I mean, in the light of the Tory disaster, because they, you know, completely toast. It doesn't matter who the leader is. But having said that, you know, if Angela Rayner has actually, you know, pulled a Swiftie on this one, that to me is not as bad as a Tory MP who has sent, am I allowed to say dick pics?
You just did.
Admitted to sending...
Nina, you're on the warpath tonight, aren't you? What did they put in your tea?
No, sending dick pics, not just that. Not
just said it again.
But has retained the whip, and I don't mean that with any other...
Was that in the picture as well?
No, well, it could be, you never know. But has retained... Not only has retained the whip, but you've got Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor...
Glad you said that right.
Coming... Exactly, I was very careful there. Coming out and congratulating him for apologising. You know...
Like he was brave or something.
Yes, this is outrageous. He's saving his skin. This is outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. And I know that Angela Rayner, all that happened before she was even an MP. I would rather have Angela Rayner, never mind what party she's from, than an idiot who'd do something like that, and a chancellor who will defend them just because it's the party line and they can't take another by-election.
Benedict?
I mean, I think it's poetic that an MP called Willie Ragg has been held hoist by a visage of the male appendage. I think that was always sort of going to happen at some stage. But I actually do agree. I think the fact that the whip has not been revealed... We can sit here and we can say that somebody who has been blackmailed is a victim. You can say that and still say, but handing over personal information of colleagues based on the blackmail is a violation not just of your colleagues' trust, it is, I suspect, you know, a violation of just about everything you could come up with. I think it shows tremendous lack of judgment from somebody who is an elected MP, a representative of the people, and I think if he hadn't resigned, actually, I do feel that the party should have taken the whip away from him. You know, where do you draw the line? Where do you go, oh, it's fine, you can be a victim and that means you can get away with passing on people's phone numbers or state secrets?
You don't know how to draw a line.
He said he was manipulated. Well, you know...
Should have gone to the police.
If he was... by saying he's manipulated, he's saying, I'm an idiot. Yes. I'm not fit to be an MP.
And we get stories every couple of weeks now about Chinese and Russian espionage attempts in Westminster. And it turns out it was really easy. You don't need sort of covert or particularly intelligent software. You just need to get on Grindr and find a homosexual Tory MP, and they will hand out this stuff as if it's sweets.
I could have told you that from 9 years of investigation. It's not hard.
No.
Well, no. I say.
Depends.
Would you like the cushion?
Depends what mood you're in. My goodness gracious, I feel I've lost control of the programme now. Now would be a good time for a very short intermission. But next up, more front pages, and this is an exclusive in the Telegraph. Is a coup against Rishi Sunak in the offing? Could he be gone in weeks? That is being speculated by the Telegraph tonight. I'll get reaction from a top Westminster insider next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Are our relationships with foreign countries actually undermining free speech on a day-to-day basis in our universities?
Well, it's very good to be with you. It's difficult to form a kind of clear conclusion because, as we know, universities are much, much more reliant on international fees than they used to be. We are seeing some sort of troubling developments, particularly at the level of admissions criteria. We're seeing quite stark and frankly scandalous disparities in the admissions criteria for domestic students as against foreign students in some universities. And so part of the problem is that the financial incentive structures are such that universities risk becoming more and more dependent upon foreign regimes because they're simply bringing in an awful lot more money.
James, of course, all of this discussion, we say countries. Frankly, mainly we're really looking at one country, aren't we? China.
Well, China is certainly a focus. I mean, nearly 1 in 3 undergraduate students from overseas at Russell Group universities were from China in 2021. 60% of overseas postgraduates come from China. We know from the FBI and the Five Eyes security chiefs that China is a master at intellectual property theft. And of course, there's a whole range of human rights issue concerns over Taiwan, Tibet, Uyghur Muslims, lockdown tyranny. I mean, all of these are issues about which, you know, researchers and academics should be free to teach and question. And in universities where there is a heavy commercial reliance on regimes like China, there are obvious disincentives to ensuring that academics and students are free to speak their mind on those issues.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, it's been a very busy show. Don't forget, Mark Dolan tonight returns tomorrow, and we've got My Big Opinion Take at 10, and King Charles's biographer for Mark meets. But more front pages, and this one is a corker. Let's take a look at it. This is, I think, a significant moment in relation to the war in Gaza. Rishi Sunak calls for an end to the war in Gaza. PM shocked and appalled by the killing of British heroes. Well, I've got two stories on the go in relation to Sunak. His position on the war in Gaza and his future at number 10. Let's get reaction to both of those stories from TV News legend Michael Crick. Michael, thank you so much for joining us for the last word. I'll bring my pundits in just a moment. Can I first of all get your reaction to this developing story on the front page of The Express? Sunak calls for an end to war in Gaza. That strikes me as a significant intervention. What's your reaction?
Well, it depends. The context is what matters here. And I'd be slightly sceptical, given it's The Express. And frankly, it doesn't really matter what Britain says. I mean, there was a time 50 years ago when, after all, Britain was involved in the creation of the State of Israel. We were influential with regard to the Israelis. Now, we don't really matter. It's the Americans that matter. And of course, the Biden administration has grown increasingly not just exasperated, but angry, I think, with the way things have been going in Gaza, the way in which there are constant pleadings for aid to be allowed in, for the Israelis to be much more careful about their targeting and the appalling death toll, I think, by anybody's judgment. So I'm not sure it really matters if Rishi Sunak does think that or has said that. And it may well be that he just believes there should be an end to the war in Gaza in the same way that the King expressed a sentiment like that he wants the war to end, rather than he's calling for the Israelis to stop.
Michael,
I'd have to read the article.
Yeah, Michael, I think you're right to take the story with a pinch of salt, but I think it's all about mood music, isn't it? And I agree that we're not key players in the Middle East, but I think it's diplomatically significant if the tone of what Downing Street are saying shifts slightly. I'm going to bring my pundits in just a moment, but let me ask you, do you think that Israel have overplayed their hand? Have they gone too far in self-defence?
I definitely think that. I think that the event, what we saw last week, is an example, I think, of the way in which the Israelis have frankly been trigger happy or bomb happy throughout this conflict. One, of course, sympathises hugely with the Israelis after what the appalling things that Hamas did, the appalling murder and rape of October the 7th. But this is a gross overreaction, almost certainly in breach of international law, and it is time for it to stop. I mean, 33,000 people have died, and most of them are women and children who are certainly not members of Hamas. It is horrific, and I think that in 10, 20, 100 years' time, people will look back on this period and wonder why the West, why, frankly, America didn't do more to stop this war, to stop the Israelis in the way that Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s. If Ronald Reagan told the Israeli Prime Minister to do something, the Israeli Prime Minister responded. And the Americans have been weak over this, I think. I mean, there are all sorts of political reasons, of course, for that. But history won't look kindly, I don't think, on America or the rest of the West over the way in which we have allowed Israel to kill at this rate and to kill many thousands of innocent people, tens of thousands.
But of course, let's not forget that Hamas have weaponised innocent people. They've had HQs based in the basements of hospitals. They've used children, they've used women as human shields. But let's stay with us, Michael. Let's get the views of my pundits as well. Nina Mishkov, Rebecca Jane and Benedict Spence. Benedict, do you think that Israel have gone too far in self-defence?
Is Hamas still present in Gaza? The answer is yes, so no. I think, actually, a lot of this is demonstrative of a great deal of squeamishness amongst Western audiences. And I understand why that is, because nobody likes war. Wars are awful. People die at appalling rates. But if you compare it to, say, the battle for Raqqa against ISIS, actually the rate of civilian deaths is not particularly high. Actually, if you look at many conflicts across the Middle East in particular, you will see, actually, that the numbers of civilians who die in these conflicts are vast, much, much more than we would expect them to be in other parts of the world. And I know that this is very difficult for people to stomach and that Palestine and Gaza is a very emotive issue. But it's not simply about Hamas either. It's a broader conflict. It's a broader context when you need to take into the fact that Hamas is being funded and supported by Iran. This is as much about the response to Iran and showing a face to Iran that Iran will not respond to in kind. I think that it is not for us, actually, safe here in Britain, to tell the Israelis how it is that they should proceed, given that people only look at this in the context of saying the Palestinians are mistreated by the Israelis. We don't have to deal with a country like Lebanon on our borders. We don't have to deal with that sort of insurgency from Hezbollah. We don't have a nation like Iran, which is, dedicated to our eradication right on our doorstep. So actually, when people talk about the Israelis have gone too far, the Israelis have gone too far, in all wars, there will always be breaches of international law. That is just how wars are.
And of course, Churchill flattened Dresden in order to defeat Hitler, which many Germans to this day still think was a humanitarian disgrace. Rebecca Jane, Zoe Strimple, columnist in The Telegraph, writing in today's paper, says Britain has turned against Israel. It is an unforgivable betrayal. Your reaction?
If there's one thing I hate talking about, it's any kind of war, because I don't find myself educated enough, and I think people that are not educated enough on it shouldn't say anything. What I think is, ultimately, war is horrific. That is the bottom line of it. If you start a war, whatever the repercussions are of it, unfortunately, you don't get a say in how bad they become. Do I like it? No. Do I think that Rishi Sunak saying it should end is appropriate to be saying now? Absolutely not. He should have been saying it a long time ago.
OK.
But this is not my bag.
Nina Mishkov, couple of seconds. You agree with Michael Crick?
No, I do not. I think Israel has gone too far. I find it very hard to listen to him as talking about squeamishness when it's about people dying, as if this is, look at seeing a mouse and going, eek. It's not that at all. These are people actually dying, 33,000. It's not just that. It's the fact that they have stopped aid getting in, that people
No, they have not.
They have stopped.
No, they have
stopped
not.
aid
no,
getting,
they have
that's
not.
Why there's
the aid
famine.
is getting into Gaza. The IDF is not in charge. No, the IDF is not in control of distributing
Why has Biden
aid.
taken a telephone call to ask Netanyahu to open more crossings,
Because
which he
Joe
has
Biden's
done?
voters want there to be peace there. Joe Biden is not going to be ready.
Well, let me tell you,
Netanyahu is enthralled to his right-wing cabinet.
OK, let me tell you, the clock is against us. Michael Crick, join us again soon. Enjoy the Lake District, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Thanks to Maria and the team.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers, though, pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge of those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain, across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight, weekends from 9 p.m.
We've got a problem in this country and it smells like you know what, because it is you know what. It's all throughout our waterways. They're absolutely full of it. You'd think in the 6th richest nation you could manage basic sanitation, but in 2024 in the UK, you'd be wrong. And it's so bad that this weekend's boat race was affected by the amount of E. coli in the Thames. I know what you're thinking. When will these kids who go to Oxford and Cambridge universities get a break in life? But it is an embarrassment. We can't hold an event on our rivers now. The rowers were given safety advice before the race that they should avoid getting any splashed water in their mouths during a rowing race. You might as well tell them to try not to rush. Leonard Jenkins of the Oxford men's team said it would be a lot nicer if there wasn't as much poo in the water. How terrible that needs to be said. The only time that would be worse is if you read that in a TripAdvisor review of a cafe. On Wednesday, Environment Agency figures revealed raw sewage spills doubled last year in England to 3.6 million hours of spills, compared with 1.75 million hours in 2022. I was shocked that it happens so much we have to measure poos by the hour. To put that in context that you might understand, an hour of poo is about 30 trips for a woman and about 2 for a man. This is because our water systems get overwhelmed when they get a lot of rain. Hello, have you met the UK before? Rain is pretty much our thing. Sewage is spilled into the waterways to prevent the system backing up. In a statement issued before the race, Thames Water said, "We have experienced higher than average long-term rainfall across London." Yeah, how can you have higher than average long-term rainfall? If it's long-term, it increases the average. Do the math, step up and learn to cope with it.
Good evening. Your top stories. Scotland has 18 regional flood alerts in place and 43 flood warnings as Storm Kathleen continues to sweep across the country. Around 12,000 households in Ireland remain without power this evening after the storm swept across the island today. Over 140 flights were cancelled as the Met Office issued a yellow warning for wind. Gusts of up to 70 miles per hour have been felt in Northern Ireland and the west of Britain. Along with the strong winds, a provisional highest temperature of the year was recorded of 20.9 degrees Celsius in Suffolk. Two planes on the tarmac at Heathrow Airport collided today, causing minor damage to their wings. The empty Virgin Atlantic 787 was being towed from the stand at Terminal 3 when it clipped the wingtip of a British Airways Airbus, which had over 100 passengers on board. Nobody was injured. Virgin Atlantic says the plane had just landed and was being transported to a different part of the airfield. The airline says it's carrying out a full and thorough investigation. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the death of a woman who was found unresponsive in a car in East London. Officers were called to Hackney early this morning. Police forced entry to the vehicle and tried to resuscitate the woman, but she died at the scene. A man in his 20s who police believe was known to the victim was arrested near the scene. Formal identification of the woman is yet to take place. In other news, the torso found at a nature reserve in Scotland, in Salford, belonged to a man aged older than 40. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim is believed to have been dead for a number of days. DNA tests are ongoing to identify him. And two former UK defence ministers have said the UK has failed to prepare for war in a whole-nation endeavour. Outgoing Armed Forces Minister James Heappey revealed in The Telegraph that only Ministry of Defence officials turned up to an exercise to prepare for wartime scenarios, which was meant for the whole of government. He called on ministers to do more to prepare for conflict. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace agreed with his colleague and said too many in government were, quote, just hoping everything will go away. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's over to headliners.
Hello, welcome to Headliners. I'm Josh Howie, taking you through tomorrow's newspapers for the next hour. And this evening, I'm joined by the Eric and Ernie of the Headliners crew, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. You don't look happy. You don't look happy about that.
Presumably I'm Eric.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Why, Lewis, you look genuinely upset about that.
I never watched Sesame Street.
Okay.
Sesame Street.
Are you going to give me anything comedic?
Yeah, I'm on my
It's
way.
going to be your sort of recalcitrant straight.
No, but you're always asking how are you doing?
I don't care how are you doing.
Exactly, but I thought you were going to ask.
Oh, okay. How are you doing, Lewis?
Why don't you mind your own business?
Great. Let's have a quick look at Sunday's front pages. The Mail on Sunday. In her own tweets, the proof Rayner has been lying. The Sunday Telegraph. UK failing to prepare for war, says ex-ministers. Sunday Times. Britain's support for Israel is not unconditional, warns Cameron. The Observer. Cameron warns of Gaza famine as Navy sent to aid the starving. And Sunday Mirror. Corrie cast of living crisis. Daily Star. Sunday. Psycho seagulls copying humans. Right, what have the Mail gone with, Lewis?
The Mail has gone with, in her own words, in her own tweets, the proof Rayner has been lying. And the Mail on Sunday unearths photos taken by Labour's deputy that exposed the truth about her house row. Mm-hmm. She got a house, one of those council houses that she's complaining about that the Tories are always taking advantage of. She got it. She held on to it for 5 years, which I think is too early. And then she sold it. And she said she wasn't living in it. She was living in it. She said she was.
It was a home.
It was a hoax. She wasn't living in it.
It was a home and a hoax.
It was a hoax because she wasn't living in it. But then again, sorry.
It's only that I can just see old Nick there. He's literally chomping at the bit to get on this battle.
Well, it's just that I spent all afternoon looking at Angela Rayner's cushions as part of my job in what I think we can now call Cushion Gate, and I'm trying to research for this story, Josh.
What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not that knowledgeable about cushions. I've never
I thought you were
never